If you have your Bibles, would you go ahead and open to Mark chapter 3? For those of you that are watching us online, welcome. Glad you're here. Imagine there's more than normal watching us online today because people got a head start on the Super Bowl, I'm guessing. But I'm glad for all of us to be here. Mark chapter 3, we're continuing just through this gospel, and we're going to read a few verses, and it's going to continue the basic flow, building the case that Mark is essentially building. He's wanting us to continue to ask, who is this man? Who is this guy, Jesus? And of course, Mark's readers actually know that, but he's dropping them back into the drama of that question. And then the idea is, when that becomes really clear, then what do we do with that? So the story of Mark unfolds in a way where, for the most part, people are guessing. Demons get it right, but Jesus keeps silencing them. And it's designed to kind of build that idea of who is Jesus and what is the significance of that. That's the fundamental flow we've got going here. And as we come to this passage, it's going to keep building some of the same themes. As Jesus' ministry is growing, his popularity is really, really taking off, and there's just crowds and a lot of hoopla. And that's not all good. In fact, Jesus tries to tamp that down because people have their expectations of what it means to be Messiah. They have their ideas of what he's going to do that get in the way of what he's actually there to do. And so he won't let people publicly acclaim him, certainly won't let the demons publicly do that. There's also a growing theme of conflict with the key religious leaders. That's going to play big in our story this morning, because even the religious leaders, or in some ways especially the religious leaders, were off track. They had a completely wrong understanding of what it is that God was about at that point in time. And so in this moment, so far Jesus has not really stirred the pot, so to speak. He's just healed, he's just taught, he's just done these things, and kind of the conflicts come to him. This morning, he's going to actually stir it. He's going to actually pick a fight. And so we'll see all that, but that's kind of the flow. I want to get the flow, and then we're going to zero in on a couple of aspects of this morning's passage that I think will be particularly fruitful. So if you want to follow along, Mark chapter 3, starting in verse 1. Again, he entered the synagogue. That's almost certainly the synagogue in Capernaum. That's where this has all been happening. There's no reason to think that the scene has changed. A man was there with a withered hand, and they watched Jesus. Now, it doesn't tell us who they is, but in the passage Craig led us through last week, the last people in view in chapter 2, verse 24, are the Pharisees. And then as the rest of our passage unfolds, we'll see in verse 6 that he's talking about the Pharisees. So they are the Pharisees watching Jesus to see that whether he would heal on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. That's their whole focus. They want to attack. And he said to the man with the withered hand, "Come here." And he said to them, "Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save life or to kill?" But they were silent. And he looked around at them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart, and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. And the Pharisees went out immediately and held counsel with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the sea. Now, get the picture here. Capernaum sits on the lake, the Sea of Galilee. So it's not like Jesus left Redemption Hill and took the 15-mile trek down Beach Boulevard to hit Huntington Beach. It's like Jesus left Redemption Hill and went over to the Whittier shopping center. Right? It's just a change of scene, getting away from what's going on, and he's now down actually at the shoreline with his disciples, and a great crowd followed. Just a whole bunch of people have been showing up because of Jesus, is the implication. People from Galilee and Judea and Jerusalem and Idumea, from beyond the Jordan, from around Tyre and Sidon. Right, that would be like if we continue, Jesus left Redemption Hill, went down to the Whitwood shopping center, then people from LA County began to gather, and people from all over Orange County began to gather, and people from San Diego and San Bernardino, and you're just listing kind of the whole area. So Galilee is the province that most of the ministry is happening in. A little bit south of there is the province of Judea, which is the capital. And Jerusalem is a very important city there where the temple is and where the religious leaders kind of have their headquarters, the priestly ones. And then Idumea is just a change in pronunciation and spelling for Edom, that ancient people who has now intermixed. And so it's kind of a new group of people who have roots in Edom and have roots in other things. And Herod the Great, was an Idumean, wasn't technically Jewish, but was part of kind of the whole Jewish kind of sphere of influence and honored Jewish customs to a point and honored Jewish worship to a point. And so Idumea, there's interest there along the east side of the Jordan River. That would be modern day Jordan. There were people from there. Tyre and Sidon, that's up on the northwest from where Jesus is at the moment of the story, and that's on the coast of the Sea of the Mediterranean Sea. Those are ancient, important cities. So people are gathering from all over the place, because they've heard about Jesus, they've heard about his power, they've heard he's casting out demons, they've heard he's healing people, amazing things are happening, they've heard he's teaching in a way that is pretty mind-blowing, and they want to get a piece of the action. They want to experience that for themselves, they want to see the exciting thing that's going on, they may have a personal need and they want to be healed. There's a lot of different reasons, no doubt they're coming, but they're all coming to Jesus. So when the great crowd heard all that he was doing, I'm in the middle of verse 8, they came to him, and he told his disciples to have a boat ready for him because of the crowd, lest they crush him. For he had healed many, so that all who had diseases pressed around him to touch him. And whenever the unclean spirits saw him, they fell down before him and cried out, "You're the Son of God." And he strictly ordered them not to make him known. So the crowd is so great that they threaten to crush him. Right? They have experienced miraculous things. They see that he has power from God, and they want to get up and touch him, because maybe if I touch him, some power will come into me, and my sickness will be taken away, or whatever my need is, it will be met. And actually, that is one way that Jesus did perform miracles. We do have examples of that in Scripture. So maybe not quite as crazy as it sounds, but it just adds to this whole hoopla of, I can't even do what I'm here to do in many ways, because people are just clamoring. This is kind of out of control, so out of control that he turns to the disciples and says, "Have a boat ready for me." Now, it's not clear. It could be an escape boat, so that they literally don't crush me and I can get away. That's possible, although the type of boat he's referring to, it probably wouldn't be what you would choose to cross the lake on. More likely, he's just saying, having this boat ready for me, because I want to minister to these people, but if they keep pressing in the chaos, there may come a point where I just need to get in the boat and push off from the shore and be out there, 20 feet or whatever, and they're all on the shoreline, and everything calms down, and then I can address and I can teach and so on. Whichever way we understand it, it's chaos on the shore, and he's trying to control that so that he can do intelligent and fruitful ministry. And as people are coming who have demons, who've been demonized, the demons recognize Jesus. They recognize that he is the Messiah, that he's the one who's come with authority. So they fall down and they proclaim who he is, which is not what he wants. Not because they're not telling the truth, but for one, you probably don't want your reputation coming out of the mouth of a demon. That's generally not helpful. But also, it's part of the same deal. It's like, if even the demons know who he is, then everyone gets all that much more excited, and he's trying to back them down. Yeah, I mean, here's what he's not saying, but here's what he's trying to communicate. Yes, I am the Messiah. Yes, I'm the one you've waited for. Yes, I'm here to fix things, but your expectation is wrong. Some of it's just plain wrong, and some of it's very much out of time. You want something to happen that I will eventually do, but not now, because there's a much deeper issue that needs to be dealt with, and I need you to back up. I need you to let me define who I am. I need you to let me show you what I'm about so that you can respond rightly. Right, that's what Jesus is trying to do, and so he keeps pushing back and keeps trying to position himself so that the real message can come through. So this section in Mark just kind of builds those same themes, the theme of conflict with the leaders, the growth of the notoriety, the power of Jesus, even the authority of Jesus. He's got authority on the Sabbath, for instance, which has come out before. So all those themes are continuing. What we want to focus in on, though, in just a few minutes, is this interchange surrounding the man who has the disabled hand. Because that's the piece of the story that stands out different, and that's also the piece that I think, as we kind of process and think through our own lives, can really have an impact on us. So I want to just reread a few verses there and get us thinking about what's going on. So back in the first part of chapter 3, they're watching Jesus in verse 2 to see whether he would heal the man on the Sabbath. Jesus has healed on the Sabbath. They get upset by that. They don't want him doing that, so they're looking for a reason that they might accuse him. And then Jesus discerns this. Jesus knows what's going on, and he does something extraordinary. And I want you to look at verse 3 and see what is not there. Look and see what you can't see. Nowhere does the man or anyone else ask Jesus to heal him. Up to this point, and in fact, every single other time Jesus performs a healing in the book of Mark, it is in response. This is the only time where he takes the initiative. And he takes the initiative in the synagogue on the Sabbath in a setting where the Pharisees, that's who's in view here, that's who was in the last passage, that's who's in this passage, even though it doesn't specifically call them out in this verse, it shows up real clearly. They're looking for a cause to accuse him, to attack him. And what he does, it says in our translation, if you're using the one I am, come here. But actually, more literally, it's stand right there in the middle. Just, in other words, right here, front and center. Stand upright, right in the middle of everything. I want everyone to see you. In other words, this big mystery, is Jesus going to heal this man? And Jesus takes away the mystery but builds the drama, and he says, oh yeah, watch this. Everyone watching? Do I have everyone's attention here? Pharisees, you want to see this? Here you go. He's right there. Pulls him right into the center. Jesus is picking the fight. He's picking the fight. He's going to heal the man. That's really the important thing from the man's point of view. But Jesus has more than one thing he's doing. That's one of the things that's important for us to remember. God always has more than one thing he's doing. And if I don't understand what he's doing with me, he may or may not reveal that, but he's doing a whole lot more than just me in this moment. Right? So here's this man that's about to be healed, but Jesus is doing something much bigger than just that. Right? If he had simply been about healing the man, it would have been a lot less headache to just pull him over the side and do the healing over there, where people might wonder what's going on, but it's harder to build a case because it's happening in quiet. Or even better, it's the Sabbath. Hey, I'm staying over at Peter's house. It's over here. Describe it. You can find it. Just ask around. If you come there right after sundown, the Sabbath will be over and I'll heal you. If it was just about healing the man, Jesus could have easily handled that. But that's actually not the main focus. That's really critical. It's really important. He has great compassion for the man, but he's actually focusing on these Pharisees. And he's picking the fight because he wants to do something really significant. He wants to surface what's in their hearts. Right? If you ever have the occasion to wind up going away in an ambulance, when the paramedics show up, what do? They're going to make sure that you're interactive, right? So there's going to be one paramedic that's asking you questions. That shows them how you are doing and also gives them information of what you're experiencing. While that's going on, there's going to be another paramedic that's also doing stuff the whole time. He's going to be rolling up your sleeve. He's going to be putting on the cuff. It's like, it's going to be measuring your blood pressure. Going to be checking your pulse. Maybe even put an oximeter on you. Why? What are they doing? They're checking your vital signs. You have an experience that's going on right now, and I want to get deeper than that. I want to get deeper than just the presenting issues. I want to see what's going on in your heart. Right? If you're communicating with me in any reasonable fashion, it's obvious you're not having a massive stroke. So my other question is, what's going on in your heart? And if they say, well, your blood pressure is 105 over 62, your resting pulse rate is 54, I checked your oxygen, it's 98%, and your pulse is steady, that tells them a lot. And you may be going, I don't know what's going on, I'm feeling terrible. And they will say, hey, we want to help you, but you're not dying right now. We're okay right now. So we can get you to the hospital, you can go talk to your doctor. There may be a number of different things based on the symptoms you described, but they're checking something more foundational. What's going on? What are your vital signs? right? Jesus is unearthing their vital signs. He's getting deeper than just the presenting issues. He's getting deeper than just the occasion. And he's saying, wait, what's really going on here? Let's check your spiritual pulse. Let's check your spiritual blood pressure. Let's check your spiritual oxygenation. Are you in a healthy place? Is there something about your heart that is really messed up? Or is it solid? That's what Jesus is doing. He picks the fight to draw out a really critical issue. So he asks a question, verse 4, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm? That's not just a random pain in the neck kind of question. That's actually a question they debated. They talked about that, right? The rabbis would talk about how tightly do you keep the Sabbath, and are there things that would supersede the Sabbath? And one of the things that was pretty universally agreed was if it actually is a matter of life and death, that takes precedence. All right, so Jesus is asking a bigger question. He's like, okay, is the Sabbath for doing good or for harm? And he's not just trying to be obnoxious with that. He's actually trying to engage them. And then he takes it up a level, and it feels like, whoa, that's a big step. Doing good or doing harm, to save life or to kill. Who's killing? Nobody's talking about killing one. There's a man here, he's got a malady, but let's be honest. He's probably had this malady for a while. It is deeply impacting for his life. It is very difficult. It needs to be addressed, but it's not a matter of life or death. He's not going to die from this. What are you talking about? I suspect Jesus is actually poking deeper into their hearts, because when this whole thing begins to unfold, what's the first thing they do? They go out and plot his murder. He's burrowing into their hearts. He's saying, look, what's going on here? What's going on here? I'm going to heal this man right now. You're going to see it. What are you thinking? And why are you thinking that? Isn't the Sabbath for doing good? Of course it's for doing good. Why would we do harsh things? Is it for killing? Who's talking about killing? Well, you will be soon enough. Right? Jesus is burrowing into their hearts because he wants to surface that there's something that's really gone awry there. They were silent. They don't answer. Now, he has bested them rhetorically, so there may just be falling silent in shame. There's a measure of that. But I suspect by his reaction, there's actually more than that. They're unwilling to engage. He gives them a chance to answer. He gives them space to respond. And then looking around, he is grieved and he is angry at the hardness of their heart. So this interchange has really been about saying, hey, let's get deeper than what's going on at the surface and let's look at your heart. Because something's really bad. Something's really gone wrong there. And I want to talk about that. And I want to expose that. And when they're unwilling to even engage, wow, that shows the level of their heart. They care literally nothing for this man. He is simply a tool. He is an instrument for them to attack Jesus. That is all he has become. Like, how did you get to that place? You're supposed to be the religious leaders. You're supposed to be the ones who represent God and help us know God. And in fact, you're the ones who are supposed to be getting it right. To understand the Pharisees and understand perhaps the hardness of heart that's come in, we have to understand what's been going on in their hearts. The Pharisees would have considered themselves the truth and purity party. Right? Their agenda was a complex, multi-layered thing. It was moral, it was theological, it was cultural, and it was political. All those things were deeply intertwined for them. And they were the party that said, hey, we are a mess. We have been dishonoring God. We've been unfaithful to the covenant. We got to do something about this. Here's how to do that. Live faithfully. Watch me. I will live faithfully, right? Remember when Paul talks about his credentials in Philippians? He talks about his credentials in Corinthians too, but I'm looking at the Philippians ones. It's like, I'm a Pharisee of Pharisees. Right? That was a good thing in a very specific way. It's Like, I really take the law seriously. I really take purity seriously. I really take God seriously. Like so many other people, like they would have viewed themselves as we are the faithful truth and purity party in a world full of compromisers and collaborators. We're the ones who are willing to take a stand for God. We're the ones who are willing to stand up and say enough. We're the ones who are willing to say everything's got to change and we've got to repent and bring ourselves under God. That's who they are. And Jesus is saying, no, it's not. That's who you think you are. Something's gone wrong. And it's gone wrong in the depths of your heart. And the fact that you're more concerned about finding a way to attack me than this man's obvious crying need says something deep. And the fact that you won't talk about this, the fact that you won't engage, the fact that you're not open, you're not teachable, you won't interact. Because he's not asking questions that are those annoying questions. These are real questions. These are ones that are worthy of asking. What is the nature of the Sabbath? Why do we have it, and what does God expect? That's a legitimate question. And they won't go there. In fact, they have defined what the Sabbath is, and that's part of the problem. That's where I think they got off base. Right? They have this passion for God. They have this passion for purity. They have this passion to see their culture reformed. They have this passion to see the political landscape shift so that it's what God would want. They have all of these things, morality and theology. That's their bread and butter, their daily existence. And it's legit. They're real about that. And yet, it's gone off the rails. And here we have a specific example of the Sabbath. Now, you can turn there or you can just listen, but Exodus 20, let me just read you a few verses from the 10 Commandments. Exodus 20, if God made a top 10 list, he did. One of them might be about the Sabbath. That would be number 4. And he actually gives quite a few words as he's giving the 10 Commandments. So listen to what it says. And if you're following along, it's Exodus 20, verse 8. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. This is a day like no other. It needs to be set aside. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in the 6 days the Lord made heaven, the earth, the sea, all that is in them, and he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Don't work, rest. Great. What does that look like? Isn't that the question that we're constantly asking? I get the truth, but what's the application? Right? Every sermon, every lesson ought to lead me there. Every time you open your Bible to meditate or to do your devotions, that ought to factor in somewhere. Okay, there's the truth. So what does that look like in real life? Because you didn't tell me a lot. You said don't work. What does that mean? Does that mean I don't sit up in bed? Does that mean I don't put on a shirt? I put on a shirt, but I can't button it? What does that mean? Can't walk to the bathroom? I mean, all these things are work. What are you talking about, God? Right? That's a legitimate question. The problem is the Pharisees got more focused on the details of the question instead of the heart of the issue. Somewhere along the line, they lost track. God gives a few more details in the Old Testament, but he doesn't give a lot. Says, when it comes to your manna, you need to go get that on Saturday. Don't go out of your house on Sunday. You need to go get that on Friday. Don't go out of your house on Saturday to get that, because that's the Sabbath. You shouldn't be doing that. It says, don't kindle a fire. Don't start a fresh fire. Later on, there'll be a few other words spoken. Most of them are the same. If you read Deuteronomy, which restates the 10 Commandments, it shifts slightly. In Exodus, it's rest because it reminds you of God's work as your creator. In Deuteronomy, it says rest because it reminds you of God as your redeemer. Right? Those two things should be really huge in our minds all the time, and Sabbath brings that to mind. There's not a whole lot of laws, a whole lot of rules surrounding it. A little bit later on, there's a few other things that happen. We see Nehemiah talk about it. We see Jeremiah talk about it. We see Amos talk about it. There's a few places, and it adds a little bit. Don't carry burdens in and out of town. Well, it still doesn't define the burden. Is a burden 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 40 pounds? That's really not the point. Don't load your animal down. don't make wine on the Sabbath, don't harvest your crops, don't do commerce, right? There's a picture there that's drawn that is sufficient. But the Pharisees, in wanting to be especially careful, didn't think it was sufficient. So they kept adding to it. They added all these different rules. You can carry this way, not that way, and so on. Right? We see it alluded to in Acts chapter 1, where Jesus is caught up into heaven, and the disciples are out on the hillside with Jesus, and then they go back to the city of Jerusalem, which is a Sabbath day's journey. It doesn't say that's the way a Sabbath should be kept. It just uses that as a measure, which is about a kilometer, basically, which was something that the rabbis came up with, the teachers came up with. It's not actually in the scripture. They just said 2,000 cubits. That's how far you can walk on the Sabbath. Why do you know that? I do. I just do. Is there any place you can point to? Well, actually, it seems probable that they were pointing to Joshua chapter 3, which is saying, hey, the Ark of the Covenant is going to go out in front of you, and you guys stay 2,000 cubits back as you follow so you can make sure you know where it is. And it seems to be the logic as well. If God's with the Ark and we're here, we ought to at least be able to catch up to God on the Sabbath, be able to come into his presence. So probably 2,000 cubits is about right. It's just totally arbitrary. Now, the intent initially was good, but now it's taken on a life of its own. And now they've got all these other things. What does it look like to work? Nowhere is healing on the Sabbath prohibited. They're the ones prohibiting it. And Jesus is raising this question, and he's trying to engage their hearts, and they will not go there because they have become hardened. Their hearts are hardened, even though they are the very ones who have worked really hard to try to be faithful, to try to respond, to try to walk rightly with God. They've gotten off track. How did that happen? What does that say for us? I think that's really a question worthy of wrestling with. Because I have to ask, am I as human as they are? Can I, as somebody whose entire life is centered on seeking to follow God and be faithful to him, can I somehow get off track sometime? Can my heart subtly grow hard? Can it stiffen? Do I need God to occasionally say, whoa, time out. Let's look inside. Something's gotten hard here, right? There's this guy over here that you don't even care about. You've got this other agenda. What's going on? That's what Jesus is doing with the Pharisees here, and I think that's what he wants us to wrestle with too. They have their issues that they have gone overboard on. They have taken what God said, and they've tried to understand it and apply it and make sense out of it, and then now they've got their thing that they've said, and that actually becomes where they plant their feet. They're not planting their feet with God, they're planting their feet with their own understanding. Now think about this. I am a representative of Jesus Christ, and I absolutely must do that courageously and faithfully. That is my calling. But I am not yet fully like Jesus Christ. That's my reality, right? If this is Christ, this is me. There's an overlap, but there's not yet congruence. My perspective, as hard as I work, is not necessarily his. My character, as much as God is growing in me, is not fully his. My heart is not fully his. My approach is not fully his. My understanding of the word is not fully his. So I have to find a way of living faithfully and boldly and uncompromisingly in the world, knowing all the time that I can be my own worst enemy, that I need to guard my heart. And in fact, I think until my heart and my character and my perspective, my understanding is congruent with Jesus, it is always appropriate for me to be modest and tempered. The Pharisees lost that. They just knew. You couldn't teach them. They weren't open to listen. And they went all to seed on particular doctrines, particular moral issues, particular cultural agendas, particular political perspectives, that's who they were. Now, if I slow down and think about that, that's a really fruitful area for me to say, wow, God, how about me? Do I have hobby horses? You know, these particular doctrines that are just really important to me. Hobby horses are great for a hobby. You don't ride out into battle on them and mow down the enemy on a hobby horse. I am a follower of Jesus. God and the gospel are absolutely central and must be articulated well and defended in our understanding. And then as we radiate out from there, there's a lot of other things that are important, yes. But how often do we kind of lock in on something and go to seed on it? That's what the Pharisees have done. How often do we pick a particular moral perspective or issue and we lock in on it? And the morality itself may be absolutely clear, but that's often not where I'm actually taking my stance. It's a step removed from what does this mean now and what do we need to do and how do I respond? Right, this last week, I saw a big furor in Christian circles because a stalwart Christian leader, passionate for the word, passionate for standing, reputation just extraordinary in that regard. In a conversation with somebody in his church was making a pastoral statement, saying, I know this is a tough situation, never encouraged a compromise of truth, but said, here's how I would encourage you to handle it, right? Now, the encouragement is one that is up for debate. Is that the right way to handle it, or is that not the right way to handle it? In fact, he even said, there are people in our leadership who would say, that's not the way I think you should handle it, but this is where I am, this is what I think you should do. Okay, here's the part that disturbs me. The absolute firestorm and the cancel culture from the church that's just pilloried him. It's like, well, he may be wrong, but we're not talking about the actual truth here. We're now talking about his approach to applying that in this particular context, and we're ready to run him out of town. That's easy to fall into. That's what the Pharisees did. And that's what Jesus is calling out, saying, you're off track, guys. Your desire to defend the Sabbath is absolutely honorable, but you have it completely wrong. You've put your parameters around that, and you're missing God. And you're actually treating this man like just a tool. What's happened in your hearts? I think that's a really current kind of issue. That's a really fresh thing for me to wrestle with and say, yeah, what about my heart? I'm very concerned about a lot of things. And this becomes even more important when the world around us continues to just seem to delight in absolutely losing its mind. Getting further and further in so many ways. Okay, how do I stand for truth with the heart of God? There's a danger. And I can't back away from standing for truth. I have to go after that. So I need to pay attention to what the Pharisees experienced here. They went after it and they lost their way. Their hearts were totally adrift from God. And I don't want that to happen for me. It can be around a doctrine that's not really the core. I was having a conversation, quite a few years ago, but I was having a conversation with a friend who talked about childhood experience that was very, very traumatic because the church they were a part of split over doctrine. And I said, oh, what was the issue? And they had a hard time remembering, but when they were able to articulate it, they said it was whatever. I can't even remember. And when I heard it, I said, wait, what? What was the issue? And they said it again. What does that even mean? They walked me through it. Like, that's not even an issue. That is so secondary. That is so trivial. Now, these are not, I don't know everything, that's for sure, but this is not the word of somebody who's naive. I'm well-read, well-experienced, well-grounded, and I have never heard of anyone making an issue out of something so, I can't even remember what it was. It was so meaningless. And this person had their whole church blow up over that. People are fighting with each other and running each other down and tearing each other apart, and the church split. It's like, wow, what happened? And you know They were all trying to act with integrity to what was right, but somewhere along the way, that target shifted and their heart got lost. We have to stand true and firm and right, but we have to make sure that our heart doesn't get lost. That's what happened with the Pharisees. That's what Jesus is confronting in them. And I think that's what he wants to check us on. I'll give you two vital signs that I think this passage helps us to say, okay, if we're going to check our pulse, we're going to check our oxygen, we're going to check those, the blood pressure, what is it? In this passage, it centers around humility and humanity. How's my humility and how's my humanity? The Pharisees, Jesus is actually asking a legitimate theological question, totally unwilling to engage it. They're not even interested. They're not interested in talking. They're not interested in learning, right? Do I come to a place where you just can't teach me? I need to ask myself that question, right? I don't have to listen to every strange or crackpot idea that comes along. There's a certain gravitas and a certain wisdom that comes, but I need to be careful. Remember, there's not congruence yet. And until that happens, I may be wrong on some things. I at least need to listen. I at least need to learn. And the Pharisees didn't do that. They were not humble. That's a real warning sign. And it's hard to catch. Hard to catch when I'm not humble. I'm proud to say that I always catch when I'm not humble. Right, we just get all twisted up. It's like, am I humble? I don't know. It's like, well, I may not be able to figure it out exactly, but I can always ask the question, and I can always ask the Spirit to search me. That's a question that should come often. Am I being humble here, Lord? Then the humanity piece, right? They're willing to toss this guy out like he doesn't matter. How can you do that? What's going on in your heart that allows you to do that? I have to ask myself, is my Christian life more grimace or grace? Do I picture myself as God's police force for the world or God's search and rescue team? Which is it that is actually the center of gravity? There's aspects of both, to be sure. But where's the center of gravity? Where's the center of gravity for my life? Right? Where's the humanity in my engagement? Where's the humility? Where's the understanding and the care and the kindness, even if I have to stand firm, even if I have to take a position that's hard, harsh? Can I do that without being harsh myself? Am I getting swept away? Right? That's what happened to the Pharisees. And I think it's easy for us. So I think we ought to really let the Spirit search us on that. I think it's also important to look deeper, though, right? The presenting issues are political, social, moral, theological. That's where the Pharisees' bread and butter was. That's where they lived. That's what they talked about. But the way this unfolds, it says, actually, not fully. Maybe that's part of it, but it's actually much deeper than that. There's a bigger problem. Because did you catch what happens after this interchange, and Jesus is angry and he heals the man, and the Pharisees are completely disinterested in that. Instead, verse 6, they went out and immediately held counsel with the Herodians against him how to destroy him. Well, now, isn't their presenting issue concern for sanctifying the Sabbath and not profaning it? Do you think putting out a contract on somebody you don't like would profane the Sabbath, to kind of gather around and plot a murder? Seems to me that profanes the Sabbath. Seems to me that they've lost track somewhere that is really not about the Sabbath. And the even more telling reality is they do this with the Herodians. We don't know a whole lot about the Herodians. They're the family and the people around Herod the Great, and then later his descendants. We know from that some things about them. They were the absolute opposite of everything the Pharisees stood for. The Pharisees are for purity, for faithfulness to the covenant, for getting rid of the Roman occupiers. They were just for going back to the way things were And the Herodians are complete political animals. We work with the Romans. In fact, that's where we get our power. We kind of compromise. We do this and that. Their towns were places we don't hear much about in the New Testament because they were horrible places like Sepphoris and Tiberias. They were like these very secularized, very godless centers of power. Nazareth looked down on Sepphoris. Nazareth was nothing. Everything was happening right down at the base there, and that was totally corrupt. That's the Herodians. The Pharisees, the purity and truth party, go out and immediately say, hey, let's get together with the corrupt, compromise, and collaborate party. Seems to me that they're not really being honest about what the real issues are. They are so angry at Jesus that they'll partner with anyone to get rid of him. What's going on? That's part of the hardness of their heart. That's part of the hardness of their heart. What's going on? Well, it's deeper. It's not just about I have this passion for moral purity. Actually, the biggest issue right now is Jesus is threatening me. He's threatening my position. He's threatening my power. He's threatening my control. He's threatening my comfort. And I'll partner with anybody to deal with that. These other issues that are more public, and yeah, they're important, but at the heart of it, it's me. It's me. I don't want to give up anything for me. Now, there's a good place for us to focus on, too. How often is it possible for me to be subtly resistant to God because he's expecting something hard? Whether it's just a simple growth in character or I want you to go do something extraordinarily hard. How easy is it for me to drag my feet or find my way around the hard road because I don't like it, or find my way to the easy road because that's what I want? I'll give you a really silly, simple example, but I think it's true. I think it's right on point. We were at Costco a couple days ago, and I love going to Costco right before Super Bowl. I don't for all the crowds because it's absolutely crazy, but I love because they have all their samples like normal, only they have samples that you actually want. There's no hand soap. There's no special, it's all stuff that clogs your arteries, and it's everywhere. It's like, it smells good, it looks good, and so you can sample your way through and have a coronary by the end die with a smile on your face. That's Costco right before Super Bowl, right? So we're going through and getting our stuff and, trying to show some restraint, not eating every sample that's there, but there's one that looks really good. I'm gonna get some of that. It was like I think it was a nacho kind of thing, but just before I was able to get it, this young guy comes in, like 10, 12-year-old boy, and grabs all the samples. A sample hog, can you believe it? It's like, wow, and immediately I'm thinking, there's something defective in that young boy's moral formation. He is being corrupt and selfish. Somebody should help that young boy grow to be the kind of person he ought to be. That's what I want to think I was thinking, but what I was really thinking was, dude, I wanted some of that. It was my moral formation that was showing because I was upset at him because he took what I wanted. I'm sure you can relate. And that's a really silly little thing. What happens when it gets really big? What happens when it's something that really matters? Where do I find myself, subtly perhaps, but somehow hardening in my heart? Where am I at risk? There's all the presenting things that I talk about and that I think are there, but if I really get deeper, my real issues are more fundamental than that, and they're more ugly. I'm just kind of selfish. And I want what I want when I want it, how I want it. And I'll listen to God for advice, but I'm not even necessarily always going to just do what he wants. And I know that's horrible. I know that's not what we're supposed to be. And I try not to be that. And yet, that's what creeps in. That's, I think, what ultimately got the Pharisees. They started off on a track that was important, but somewhere along the way, they totally got derailed. And I think it wasn't just, well, you locked in on a core, you treated as core something that wasn't core, you added your stuff to it, and that may be a good conviction, but it's not good to pose that on everyone else. And it's like, that's all true. But at the heart of it, they had a life that they liked, and they were going to guard that and build that, whatever cost. And Jesus wants to pull that out. says, guys, your hearts are hard. Is my heart hard? That's been my prayer actually during this sermon. It's like, Lord, show me where my heart is hardening, where it's stiff, where it's not supple, where these things creep in. Please. Now, I want to just focus us for just a moment on Jesus before we close this up. Because Jesus shows great compassion. It's easy to see that he's showing compassion to the man who has the physical disability. He is willing to do good for the man, even at great personal cost to himself. But I would suggest that his interaction with the Pharisees is actually an expression of compassion. And I would suggest that for at least a couple reasons. One, from the immediate context. As we've started in Mark, you remember when things were really lighting up for the first time and everyone's getting excited. They're at Capernaum. People are being healed. Everyone's just clamoring. Jesus gets away to pray. Peter comes and finds him. And he says, everyone's looking for you. And Jesus says, I'm going to leave. Wait, these are people who are demon-possessed, who can't walk, who have all kinds of ailments. They're coming to you for help? Yeah, I know. We need to go. Because I need to proclaim this message everywhere. That's actually why I came. Right? God is not content to deal with me at a surface level. He will. He will. How I feel about something matters. My mental, emotional, moral, physical, financial, all those things, they matter. They matter. And God cares about those things, and he meets me in those things. But my fundamental, most important issue is deeper. And so he's showing compassion to the Pharisees by giving them a chance to address it and say, guys, your hearts, that's the problem. And that's what I've come to address. Remember the story of the prodigal son. We focus so much on the grace for the prodigal, rightly, and the character of the father, who represents God, but the character of the father also extends to grace for the older brother. The older brother who didn't think he had anything wrong, but he had a totally corrupt heart. Our God cares about us down to the core, which means one of the things he cares about doing is exposing our hardening hearts. And my encouragement for you is if God is probing you right now, he's prodding you to say, look at this. What about that? It may be uncomfortable, probably is uncomfortable. That is his love. That is his grace. The Lord chastens his children for their good. Loose paraphrase of Hebrews 13, you can read it. And he may be doing something in me that doesn't feel so good, but it may be a great grace. I think this has to have broken Jesus' heart. Certainly is angry at them. They're supposed to lead, and they're doing this. But you just read Jesus' interaction with the Pharisees. There are these moments of breakthrough. You're almost there. You almost have it right. Let me tell you about this father who represents my father. And you all see the messed up younger son, but you're the messed up older son. Let me show you the love of God. God cares very much about those things, and God cares very much about my heart in this moment. And if he's exposing something, the question is, what am I going to do with that? How am I going to respond? I'm going to take the offering. Would the ushers please come? Let me pray for us. Lord, I'm grateful for your grace in my life. I pray that you would show me where my heart is hard or at risk of hardening. You do that for all of us. Lord, help us. We are frail. We are weak. We need your grace. Our lives are not fully congruent. Help us to stand firm. Help us to stand wisely. Help us to stand confidently. Help us to stand courageously. Help us to stand humbly. Help us to stay teachable. Help us to have soft hearts. Help us to not major on secondary things and miss the major things. Lord, help us to guard our hearts as we seek to follow you. Holy Spirit, would you guard our hearts? Would you reveal to us what we need to see? And give us grace in this moment. Pray in Jesus' name. Amen.